Right, in this particular tutorial I want to talk about drift, because I feel that drift is probably one of the most overlooked synths in Ableton, and it's accessible to pretty much every single version of Ableton Live, which is great, but it's insanely powerful. It has some really nifty tricks that can be really nice. This is just a quick example using drift for every single sound that you're about to hear, from the kick, the snare, the hi-hats, everything else. And I'm going to show you some ways that we can use it in very unique ways, right? Because the thing about drift is that it takes on the basically the West Coast synthesis, and in West Coast it was all quite exploratory, and a lot of the sounds within West Coast, they kind of sound organic, you know, so drift is really good for that, right? It gives you that sort of organic sound. This is just a drum bass thing, but I'm gonna do something maybe techno-y, but let's explore this. So this is just basically just a loop with a bass line. So the bass line as well, a little bit of automation added on this side, as you can see. Alright, so the architecture in drift is really cool, because what you've got to play with here is you've got two oscillators, but they sort of work in tandem in a sense, right? So the pitch of oscillator 1 and oscillator 2, they're both affected. There's no way to just affect the pitch of just one oscillator or anything like that, right? If that makes sense. So you got like a pitch modulation section that affects both. So they're supposed to work in tandem in a sense, right? You can get the tuning as well, so from the get-go you can get some really fat sounds. Like if I wanted to do like a really basic sort of stuff, you can do, for example, two sawtooths to create like a unison type sound. You know, and you can, the thing about drift that's really interesting is that you can see how the waveform changes in real time, which I think is a really nice feature. Like if I were to place oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 both in the same octave, then you can see that as I apply the tuning, you can see the kind of like movement that we can potentially create onto the waveform. So let's just have a listen to this. So if let's slow it down to 130, okay, and if I were to just play something here, okay, so let's say for example I play a note. So straight away that's going to give you like a unison type sound, right? So let's just let's add it in there. Okay, cool. Okay, there we go. Just going to add it. So it's just going to be one note that's going to repeat. Okay, there we go. Wicked. So first things first, obviously we can detune the waveforms, and you can adjust the volumes. At the moment they're not going to the filter, but the filter itself adds character. Okay. So I believe this is based on the Moog, and this one is based on the MS-20 filter, which is really nice. So straight away you can really take away some of the highs, up some resonance. The resonance is quite tamed on something like drift, but one thing that can also work quite well is the fact that obviously we can detune it more, so we got like a typical kind of like super saw kind of unison type sound, but of course we can add more voices, and as you can see here on the mode, we can go to unison and we can stack voices. And the good thing about it is that the voices can kind of drift in pitch, and so this synth is made to work a little bit more like an analog synthesizer where it's unstable. So obviously the voices at the moment, they kind of start at the same point, and you can open them up. You get this really lovely kind of fullness, and the drift is not so apparent in unison. It's something, it's just basically sort of like affecting the pitch of his voice a little bit. It just adds a little bit of extra flavor, and that could work quite well as well, just to get this sort of like thickness on the sounds. We got high pass filter as well, so we can add some we can remove some of the low end energy if we want it, to sort of thin it out. But also, you know, we can definitely apply, for example, movement to the frequency of the filter, etc. So that's kind of like how drift works when you're doing it like that. The other thing as well that we can do is we can retrigger the oscillators, basically meaning that oscillator 1 and oscillator 2, rather than being free running, that are constantly running in the background, they will retrigger per key. And that gives you a little bit more like almost like a laser kind of sound. Let me just take the frequency down. You can hear, like if I bring the unison down, let's bring the drifting down. You got this kind of like phasing effect where all the voices start at the same point, but they're all getting detuned. So really cool, of course, if you play with like much lower octaves on for bass sounds. I mean, that's too low, obviously. Really cool. Remember, if I take the retrigger off, you don't get that sort of laser effect. You don't have that sort of like pitch bend, that kind of effect that happens at the beginning of the note, right? The other things as well that we can do is we can add noise. So if you want to add a little bit of character, that can be really nice. Sometimes what I tend to do is I tend to not filter the oscillators. So you can see that the oscillator 1 and oscillator 2, they are not going to the filter, but then I tend to filter the noise. And the noise can, of course, you know, if you add lots of resonance, the noise can kind of become like an oscillator because you can set the frequency to track, right? Remember, it's not affecting the oscillator 1 and oscillator 2. It's just affecting the noise, right? You can hear it. You see, and then maybe we can go quite low. Maybe filter 1. You can bring it much louder. You can hear that, right? Adding character, right? So maybe include a little bit more. Anyway, so that's the sort of like interesting basis on how the routing of the oscillators work in tandem with the filter, which is in itself is actually quite capable. I haven't added any modulation at all. This is obviously a very basic sound, right? Like the unison type sound is a very typical sound that's being used and overly used in pretty much any genre of electronic music that you can think of, but still it can sound really fat, especially if you filter. Sounds really, really fat. And now that little bit of noise. I mean, I think maybe that's a little bit too close. There you go, right? So you get that sort of fat sound. So let's see what else can we do, because the thing about drift that's really interesting is that we basically got an envelope too that can be mapped to anything, right? But we also have got an LFO, but the LFO has got some really interesting shapes. So this LFO is not a strict LFO per se, it's kind of like an advanced LFO. So you can see that you can do hertz, you can do milliseconds, you can sync it to time as well, so 1/8, but also you can do FM. So that can be extremely cool because you can add FM modulation to any of the oscillators or even the filter. Okay, so that can give you some really interesting tones. Like, just to give you an example, I got this this sort of resound. If I were to route the LFO here, let's make the noise a little bit less obvious. So what we're doing right now is we are the modulation to the filter frequency, because you can see here frequency modulation LFO. If I do a lot of resonance and I speed up the ratio, you can hear, let's bring the noise down, sorry. There you go. Really cool kind of tonalities, right? By modulating the filter. Because this is FM, right? There you go, right? Really nice. And so that can be another thing that we can apply. And of course, I can apply this FM. So this is basically like an oscillator, basically, right? This third oscillator, well, this fourth oscillator, right? This can modulate as well. For example, the pitch, if you want it, so you can route it, and it's already, like you can see, the LFO is down here. So the pitch modulation section. And now you can really hear it. So if I were to just kill the filter off, obviously the ratio is really high and the amount is really high, so that sounds really unpleasant. go, right? And so you can really hear the effect. And this amount, the amount of the LFO, can be routed by something else. So for example, I could say, well, no FM, full FM, and I can say, well, I want maybe the envelope to control the amount of the LFO, right? So that can be really cool as well. So I can have envelope to 100% maybe to control it, and then I can put the amount. And if I were to give a tag, let's bring it up. There you go, right? So it comes in gradually. You get the idea, right? So this can be a really creative way to just add movement onto sounds. Besides that, Drift is insanely powerful as well because it has got some of the things that many people don't really look at. Let me just duplicate this channel. So enough of the Reese, right? Let's do some usable sounds. So I'm gonna slow it down to techno. Let's do like a techno kind of bass line kind of track. I don't know. Let's just explore that for a minute. So if I go, for example, let's do a bass line. So one of the things about Drift that's really interesting is the fact that, let's say, if I just do like, I don't know, I'm just gonna add a few notes here, a little bit higher. It's very low, isn't it, this Drift? Okay, let's just bring the oscillators to 0. Okay, there we go. Just gonna do like a pattern like this, nothing too crazy. Okay, so it's just like repeating. Let's play that. There you go, right? So I can go into mono mode, and the mono mode can add like a sub oscillator. I don't know if you can hear that, so it gives it like a nice sort of bottom end flavor into the sound. But the key of this sound that's really, really unique is the shape. So this shape basically allows me to wavefold the sine, and that creates a lot of extra harmonics. It sounds a little bit like a fem, right? So one thing that we can do, for example, is I can say, okay, this shape is going to be controlled by the LFO, right? The LFO is here. And here maybe I can go into hertz, retriggering, right? Right, you can hear it, right, coming through. There you go. So I'm just going to bring, so the envelope 2 doesn't control the amount. So now you can really hear the LFO being controlled by the rate here. Okay, so let's just bring it back up. There you go. But what we can also do is we can set this LFO to be completely random, and this is one I really like, which is sample and hold. So if I slow it right down, you can see that every note has got a different shape to it. If we make that more subtle, you can hear that every note has got a different sort of flavor, right? Really cool. So it's a nice way. This is very characteristic of West Coast synthesizers, where you can use LFOs and random LFOs to do some interesting stuff as well, to just make the notes have a little bit more movement, or make the oscillators be less static. Okay, and obviously that's for oscillator 1. Oscillator 2 as well has got like a wavefolding as well, as you can see there. But then if you play with the other oscillators, they've got different things as well. So this kind of changes the shape. This one here is a really funny looking waveform as well. It's like a combination between a sine and a triangle, and then you can kind of square them out as well. So you get this kind of like retro squarey kind of sound, and slightly sort of like 8-beat, right? So that can be quite interesting too. And then we've got the other ones here, like the sawtooth. So the sawtooth actually does like sync. So you get this like oscillator sync. And the other ones here, like the square, it does square sync, which is really interesting sounding. So that can give you lots of possibilities. And the other square here is just a typical pulse width modulation, right? So you can see that just by playing with this, we can get variation. Another thing as well that is worth noting is that the shape, you can do movement on that shape with, instead of the LFO, you can say the envelope 2, which can be really handy. And here it can give you the bass a little bit more pluckiness. Let's bring it up. So it's basically me taking this shape and making it react to the attack. And that can be a really nice way to sort of add a little bit more punch. Oh, and also one thing I noticed as well is I didn't actually kill the pitch oscillator LFO, so let's just kill that. That sounds better. Okay, there we go. So it's like a constant note. All right, okay, so we got this bass sound. I like it as it is at the moment. Of course, I can add more to it, but for now, I'm just gonna let that roll. And let's create a kick sound. So Drift also excels when it comes down to creating drums, simply because of its architecture and how much stuff you can do with it. So let's just build a kick, and the best way I find to make any sounds is by just doing it while you got the notes there, right? If that makes sense, rather than just hitting the keys and stuff. All right, so let's just bring this down. Let's kill this. I just want a pure sine. There you go. So we got a few possibilities there. So we can shape the attack, right, and the duration of the kick with the envelope one, which basically controls the volume. So that's good. Then we've got another envelope as well that can control, for example, the pitch if we want it. And you can see that's easily done because we got pitch modulation envelope 2. Right, that's too much for a kick, but we can adjust it until eventually sounds good. That's nice. And then we've got, I think for a kick, for consistency, I'm going to set the oscillator to retrigger. Otherwise, kind of can sound a bit messy. It's almost like every kick is ever so slightly different, right? And of course, we can play with the shape. But the problem we find here is I want to have separate control over the pitch envelope, right? Over the pitch of the kick, right? Which is created by the pitch modulation here. But now if I want to modulate the shape, I cannot use the same envelope. I might want to use something else. So one thing that we can do is we can use the LFO 2, the LFO, and on the LFO we can change the shape. As you can see here, I can change the shape to something like a linear shape, and the rate is the depth. I'm going to set that to retrigger. So what I'm actually doing, let's make it, there you go. So what's happening is like this is controlling the shape, so it's adding more harmonics at the beginning of the kick. Let's change the rate and make it faster to tighten it up, right? So the faster the rate, the tighter the envelope. Nice, we like that. We've got as well a sub oscillator, so I don't know if I feel like I wanted to add more energy, I can add that. Let's just bring the tuning down. I think I like it with just one oscillator, in all fairness. So you can get some cool stuff as well. We've got also this stereo mode, so you could potentially get like stereo open kicks with a little bit of drifting, which is kind of funny because, I mean, you know, not that many producers use stereo kicks, but you could potentially do it. And if we wanted to add more pluckiness as well, we can add noise. But the problem with that is that we don't have a separate control for the noise amount, but we can do on the modulation section here. So the modulation, as you can see here, we can say that the LFO controls the noise gain, and that could give us a really short noise. Like, let's play with the rate here. You see? So this rate controls the shape and the noise, right? So let's just shorten it. That's good. Okay. Of course, a kick drum needs to have some kind of movement. The problem with the filters here is that you cannot boost the low end. It's only got a high pass, but there's no resonance for the high pass, which is a bit of a shame. It's a bit limited in that regard. We can add character, of course, by routing to the filter, but I find that I don't like the energy it adds for a kick. You see what I mean? It just adds like some extra harmonics, which I don't like. So I just prefer it clean like that. But what we can do is we can basically add an EQ to enhance the low end of our kick, just to make it sound a little bit fatter, really. We can even go a little bit lower, I think. It's okay. You see what I mean? Can we go lower? Maybe let's just change the note. See if that sounds better. Yeah, that's a little bit fatter. Cool. Okay. So now we got the kick and we got the bass line. So let's have a listen to that. That sound is it's okay. Don't mind it. I think maybe what I want is this LFO to also affect the shape. You can see at the moment it's the envelope too that's affecting the shape. So let's just add some randomness to the shape here, right? You can see it. So what I can do is I can say, okay, LFO, I want you to control the shape as well. So LFO to shape. And remember, the LFO is random, so it's going to give you like every note is going to be ever so slightly random. Cool. We can have the other oscillator. Maybe like that could be higher. Maybe more detuning. Oh, I like it like that. Or maybe that one could be filtered. The LFO is controlling the filter as well, so let's kill that. Yeah, that's kind of cool. But I want to have this oscillator. I want it to be shorter. So I wonder if I could maybe like set the envelope to control the volume of oscillator too. Can we do that? I think we can. Let's see if I go, okay, so the mod wheel, we don't want that. Envelope 2, controlling the gain. There you go, that should do it. So now instead of being like a long sound, that's adding a little bit of top end, right? Can you hear that? Nice. It sounds a bit boring because it's a bit, I don't know, I think I'm gonna kill the mono here, and I just want to make it maybe like a little bit more exciting. Let's just go to unison. Sounds messy. Let's go to stereo. Yeah, there we go. It doesn't have that oomph on the low end, but I could potentially bring that oscillator down. Yeah, that's good. That works nicely. Okay, for example, just to give you an idea. And of course, you know, remember that in Ableton, there's another thing that we can do, which I like to do sometimes, which is on the generate function here. I can generate I can seed some notes, and I normally do it like this. So I think, so I'm going to go to like that low, and then I'm going to go to that. Oh, like so, just bring it from E. That's the lowest pitch. To the highest pitch is going to be like, I don't know, maybe there. And obviously we don't want that many notes. We just want for voices. Too much. Maybe too high. Let's go a little bit lower on this. I don't mind that. I don't like this high end. This is, there you go, that's better. Okay, all right, so you can hear this sort of movement that we have on the sound. Right, let's add an open hat because we need that, because we're doing kind of techno. It's not fully techno, but yeah, I don't know, it could be techno really. Let's just put some open hi-hats, and you might be thinking, but Hector, how the heck are you going to make a hi-hat with drift? And it's like, well, you can easily, right? So one thing I like to do in drift, which is this, is instead of adding a noise to make a hi-hat, which is the typical way of doing it, right? So if I do this, right, this is the open hat. If I add the noise, that could be, you know, you could filter it, right? And that is your hi-hat, right? Let's just bring the attack down. Right, so if we go, that's okay, but I don't find it as exciting. That kind of noise is just a little bit boring. I prefer to sort of use an oscillator instead. Give it some metallic sort of feel with the wavefolding. Let me try a different waveform. I quite like that. Maybe go higher. Right, and instead of adding the noise, what we can do, which is a bit insane, but you can try it, is to add the LFO here and set the LFO to sample and hold and speed it up in FM. Okay, so FM is the way to do it, right? So really fast rates. There you go. Let's bring it in here. LFO to the pitch. Nice. And the funny thing is that this noise, depending on the ratio, it gives you more than just noise, you know? You see what I mean? Maybe that pitch could be higher. No, keep it there. Let's bring more of the noise by increasing the amount of LFO. And then, of course, we can play around with the decay. There you go. That's quite cool as well, because if we add another oscillator, we can add a little bit of thickness. There you go. Nice. Let's try a different waveform. Yeah, I like that. You see what I mean? It just sounds thicker, right? It's just got a little bit more flavor to it. So this is some of the nice things that you can do with drift. And of course, I'm only touching the surface. and we can play around with the note. So if we want it to be maybe that's more hi-hat. Press up on the decay. Maybe more of the noise. Let's randomize that sequence. Too much, right? Let's just let's get rid of that. Just play around with this. I don't know. I just feel like I want to shape the sound a little bit. So just turn this down. Shorten that. Make it stereo, I think. Maybe unison, I think, might work quite nicely on this. Let's explore it. Yeah, it gives it like more thickness. Let's drift it. Yeah, that's good. There you go, right? So you get that sort of hi-hat energy. Not sure about this bass. Let's explore that for a minute. Turn that off. What I quite like it with no retrigger, it just gives it like, just makes it more unstable, right? That's cool. I like that. That's quite nice actually. And let's see what happens if we put it through the filter. Yeah, the filter has got quite a lot of character. I don't think I quite like it plain. I don't know, sounds nice like that. Maybe this could be tighter. I quite like it like that. Maybe less. There you go. It needs a little bit of sab. So let's just try adding a sab. Let's bring it down. So instead, let's try doing one thing. So I'm just gonna bring this down. Let's not put it through the filter. So that's the sab. Problem with that is obviously that you might get overlapping voices. Let's just make it a little bit more reactive. Let's just hear on his own. Okay, we can't make it mono. So just one voice. Maybe that's better. So you don't get overlapping notes. And then we can bring the oscillator one. It's almost like a 303, which I really like. Let's play around with this. There you go. And of course we can create some pad sounds, and we can create some other elements as well that could work with drift. So if we were to want to create a pad sound, the good thing about this is that we can get fairly complex sounds. And I think with drift the best way is always to start with just one oscillator and see how far you can push it. So just for a pad sound, I'm just going to play something. Let's make that, of course, not mono, probably Right, let's just do. Cool. So we can do some cool stuff with this. That can be quite nice, isn't it? Let's just get an LFO to do that for us, right? So LFO controls the shape. Let's make it fast. Retrigger. Let's go to Hertz. I want it to be like more like a staccato, so let's just go into like a so down. I could maybe quantize them. Cool. And remember that we can potentially get that LFO to control other aspects of the sound. So we can go here and we can be like, okay, let's just say the volume of the synth is also controlled by the LFO. So we can go to the modulation page, LFO to control the volume of the synth, and that's going to give it more of like a bouncy sound. Yeah, that's cool. Give it more drift. Let's give it a sub oscillator. Maybe go higher. That's quite cool. Let's change it. Ah, cool. Let's just go over to unison. Nice. What else can we do? Right, we got another envelope here. That's not doing anything, is it? So one thing that blew me away is the fact that they emulated the West Coast synthesis as well in terms of what the envelopes do. And in West Coast synthesis, what you can do is you can re-trigger the envelopes. The envelopes are not just envelopes, they can work as LFOs. And this is what they've done here. So we got this this envelope 2, but you can click on the re-trigger button. And that basically turns it into like an LFO that you can reshape, and you can run it up to FM rate. Let me show you what that sounds like if we start applying this envelope to the pitch of both oscillators. Speed up the rate. Nice. I quite like that actually in a funny way. Open it up a little bit more. We can add some reverb. I like that, but we can make it so it tracks the pitch, because at the moment the rate is not tracking the pitch, is it? And there's no way for me to, at the moment, I don't think there is. There's no way for me to kind of like say the envelope to rate to be tracked by the pitch or something. No, you can't do it. But you can do something else. We can go over here and set that to 1.1 so it becomes FM. Listen to the difference. You see? It's crazy because we can get the shape going and then we can apply FM with this. too much, right? Like the thing with the theme is that you have to be quite careful, because if you add too much of it, normally the ratios that work best are 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, right? So add less. Nice. I like that. Let's add more release. We got a filter to play with, and noise. Filter the noise. Nice. Let's open the uni some more. I quite like that. That's not too bad. Potentially we could add FM and then filter them. There you go. And then of course we can play with the rate. Let's just, yeah, the bass is 9 key, sorry. As I'm trying the main volume, but if we do fully, we really chop it. Nice. I want to add some reverb up to this. I think reverb will fit it. Let's try away. Let's just bring the reverb. Let's see what we want to affect. Normally reverb, what I will advise my students to do is to always just put the reverb 100% wet, so you can actually hear what the reverb is doing, and then you can adjust what sort of part of the sound or the signal you want to be affected by the reverb. That's quite a lot. This absorbs the reverb. Basically it's like a dampener, so you can like make it sound like less that is in a glass room and more into like a tunnel or something. Shorten the length of the room, well, the decay, how long the reverb stays on. Nice. Let's maybe increase the size of the room. This sounds a little bit more distant. Yes, and let's make the decay. Nice. Let's bring it down. Nice. So obviously that bass line is all over the place. We need to make it in key, but you get the idea, right? So you can see that drift is insanely powerful and only scratching the surface. So this is just like kind of like a stab sound with movement, and the LFO can control that. So it's insanely powerful, and it's probably one of the most overlooked synths in Ableton because it comes bundled with all the versions of Ableton Live, but now you can see that is actually, yeah, it's really cool to work with. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and on to the next one. Let me know what you thought in the comments, and if you want to give it a like, of course, and if you want to subscribe, by all means do so. We'd love to have you here, and yeah, let's catch up soon.